During my son's wedding, the bride whispered in my ear, "Old man, you're gonna buy us a house, or I'm leaving him." I nodded silently, playing the role of a happy father, but inside I was boiling with rage. When I took the microphone, I revealed the whole truth about her. Even the police were shocked. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The car doors slammed in sequence. Driver's side first, then passenger. Through my living room window, I watched Wesley gesture as he spoke, hands moving in that animated way he'd had since childhood. The woman beside him paused on the driveway, her eyes traveling up the house facade, calculating something I couldn't name yet. I wiped my palms on my jeans and opened the door before they knocked. "Dad, this is Trudy. Trudy, my father, Forrest." She extended her hand with a smile that reached her lips, but stopped short of her eyes. "Mr. Dixon, Wesley talks about you constantly. This house is beautiful. How long have you lived here?" 23 years. Built most of the additions myself." Her eyebrows lifted with interest that felt rehearsed. "Really? You must have quite the skill set. Wesley mentioned you own several businesses." We moved inside. I'd spent the afternoon cleaning, cooking, my mother's pot roast recipe that Wesley loved. Gertrude's heels clicked across the hardwood as she surveyed the living room. Her fingers trailed along the back of my leather sofa, then lifted a framed photograph of Wesley's college graduation. She held it at arm's length, studying not the image but the silver frame itself, turning it to catch the light. "Beautiful craftsmanship," she murmured, setting it down with care that seemed more about assessing value than showing respect. At dinner, Wesley glowed. I hadn't seen him this animated in years, not since before his mother and I split. He served the pot roast with pride, as if he'd cooked it himself. "So, Forrest, 5 auto shops across Phoenix. That's impressive. Do you handle all locations yourself?" Gertrude cut her meat into precise, small pieces. "I have managers. I mostly oversee operations now." Wesley jumped in, voice full of pride. "Dad built it from nothing. Started with 1 garage in 1989. "That's remarkable. And you're planning to retire soon?" The question hung there, specific and pointed. I set down my fork carefully. "Eventually. Haven't set a timeline." She nodded, took a delicate bite, then pivoted. "What's the square footage here? The layout is so well designed." "Around 2,800. And the property value in this area must be—" She caught herself, laughed lightly. "I'm sorry, I work in marketing. I analyze everything. Occupational hazard." Wesley reached over and squeezed her hand. My son was 34 years old, successful, intelligent, and completely blind to what I was seeing. I decided to test something. "Actually, I've been considering selling an investment property I own in Scottsdale, thinking it might be time to liquidate some assets." Gertrude's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Her eyes sharpened with unmistakable interest. "Really? What kind of property?" "Duplex. Purchased it in 2010. Market's good right now." "How much are you asking?" The question came too quickly, too eagerly. "Haven't listed it yet. Still weighing options." She leaned forward slightly. "You know, I have connections in real estate. I'd be happy to introduce you to some excellent agents. What's your expected price range?" I didn't answer directly, just smiled and changed the subject. But I'd seen what I needed to see. That flash of hunger. Quickly masked. Wesley's phone buzzed during dessert. He glanced at the screen and winced. "Work emergency. I need to take this. It's the Belmont client." He stood, mouthing an apology, and stepped onto the back patio. Gertrude rose smoothly, gathering plates. "Let me help you clean up." In the kitchen, away from the windows where Wesley paced outside, her demeanor shifted like someone flipping a switch. The warm smile vanished. Her voice dropped to a more businesslike tone. "Wesley is a wonderful man, but he needs support to get started. I'm sure you understand that as his father." I kept my face neutral, continued rinsing a plate. "Get started with what, exactly?" "Life. A real future. You know how expensive everything is now." Her smile was slight, knowing. "Wesley has a good job. He's doing fine." "Fine isn't the same as secure, is it?" She tilted her head, studying my reaction. I dried my hand slowly, meeting her gaze. "What exactly are you asking me for?" She laughed, light and dismissive. "I'm not asking for anything, Forrest. Just making conversation. Families should understand each other, don't you think?" Wesley returned before I could respond, still apologizing about the interruption. The warmth flooded back into Gertrude's expression so seamlessly I might have imagined the previous exchange. They left an hour later. Wesley hugged me at the door, his embrace tight and hopeful. "Thanks for tonight, Dad. She's amazing, right?" "She's certainly interesting." He pulled back, searching my face. "I knew you'd like her. This means everything to me." I watched them drive away, Wesley's taillights disappearing down the street. Then I walked back inside, suddenly exhausted. The bathroom light was still on. When I went to switch it off, I saw the paper on the counter, a credit card statement folded once. It must have fallen from her purse. I picked it up. The balance jumped out at me immediately. 18,450.73. Back in the living room, I sank onto the sofa, the statement in my hands. My phone buzzed with a text from Wesley. "Thanks again, Dad. I think she's the one." I stared at those words. The one. Then at the number on the paper. $18,000 in debt, asking pointed questions about my assets, making veiled demands for financial support. The house felt different now, heavier. I walked through it slowly, seeing what she'd seen. Not memories, not the scratch on the doorframe where Wesley had measured his height each birthday, not the window I'd replaced after his baseball went through it. Just square footage, property values, assets waiting to be liquidated. I photographed the statement with my phone, the flash illuminating the numbers in harsh detail. Then I sat in the darkness of my living room, the paper still in my hand, and understood that everything had changed. My son needed protection, and I was the only one who could see the danger. 3 days passed like a slow bleed. The credit card statement sat in my desk drawer, a physical weight I felt every time I walked into my home office. I'd rehearsed the conversation a dozen different ways, gentle, direct, evidence-based, emotional. None of them felt right. None of them ended with Wesley believing me instead of her. I called him Tuesday morning. "Can you meet me at the Camelback shop? I need to talk about something." The pause on his end told me he already knew this wasn't casual. "What about?" "Rather do it in person, around 2? "Fine." The word landed flat, defensive. I arrived early, walking through the bay where Miguel was rotating tires on a Camry. The familiar smell of motor oil and rubber usually centered me. Not today. I kept checking my watch, rehearsing opening lines that sounded weaker each time I repeated them. Wesley's truck pulled in at 2:10. He walked into my office without his usual smile, arms already crossed. "Thanks for coming by the shop. I wanted to talk about Trudy." "What about her?" The challenge was immediate. "You've known her how long? 4 months?" 5. "What's your point?" "That's not very long to be discussing marriage." His jaw tightened. "You proposed to Mom after 3 months." The comparison stung because it was accurate. I shifted tactics. I noticed she asked a lot of questions about money, about the business. She's interested in my life. That includes my family. It felt like an assessment, not interest. Wesley's voice rose. "An assessment?" She was being polite. "Wesley, I'm just asking you to slow down." "No, you're asking me to doubt her. That's different." I could see I was losing him, pushing him further into her corner with every word. I reached for the drawer where I'd placed the credit card statement, then stopped. His face was already closed off, his posture rigid with defensiveness. Showing him the evidence now would only make him dig in harder. "You've been alone since the divorce." His voice dropped lower, colder. "Maybe you forgot what it's like when someone actually wants to build a future with you." The words landed like a physical blow. I kept my voice quiet, controlled. "That's not fair. Neither is this conversation. Trudy makes me happy. Why can't that be enough?" "Because happiness based on deception doesn't last. You just can't accept that I'm happy without your approval." He moved toward the door, his movements sharp with anger. "Wesley, wait." "I'm done listening." He was gone before I could form another sentence. Through the office window, I watched him climb into his truck and drive away too fast, tires squealing slightly as he turned onto the main road. I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the sounds of the shop. Air compressors hissing, the rhythmic clang of tire irons, Miguel's radio playing something in Spanish. Normal work continuing while my relationship with my son fractured. I'd handled it wrong, I knew that immediately, but I didn't know what the right approach would have been. The next day, my phone rang while I was driving home from the Mesa location. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Forrest, it's Trudy. I hope it's okay to call. I pulled into an empty parking lot, put the car in park. What do you want? Her tone was sweet, conciliatory, completely ignoring my curtness. Wesley mentioned you two had a misunderstanding. I feel terrible about it. This is between me and my son. Of course, but family is important to me. She paused, and I could almost hear her smile. Wesley and I have been looking at houses, and I thought, if you helped with the down payment, maybe 80 or 100,000, it would show Wesley you support our future together. The audacity of it hit me like cold water. $80,000 to $100,000, framed as proof of my support for their relationship. I took a long breath before responding. You thought that, did you? It would mean so much, to both of us. Her voice carried a note of certainty, as if she'd already calculated my agreement. I'll think about it. I ended the call before she could respond. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, watching people come and go from the grocery store across the street. Regular people with regular problems, figuring out what to make for dinner, whether they'd remembered everything on their list. Simple, normal concerns. Mine had just gotten significantly more complicated, but the call had clarified something crucial. This wasn't opportunism. This was strategy. She'd turned the conflict between Wesley and me into leverage for an explicit six-figure demand. That required planning, calculation, experience. I needed to know who I was really dealing with. A business associate had mentioned a private investigator once, Rita Chen, thorough and discreet. I found her number in my contacts and called before I could second-guess the decision. 2 days later, I sat across from her in a coffee shop on 16th Street. Rita was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 45, with gray streaking through her black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd brought a leather portfolio and a cup of tea she didn't drink. I'd prepared a folder, printouts of the credit card statement photo, notes from the dinner, the timeline of events. I slid it across the table. I need someone investigated, thoroughly. Who? She didn't open the folder yet, watching my face instead. My son's fiancée. I think she's after money. You think, or you know? I tapped the folder. I know enough to be concerned. I need to know everything. Rita opened it then, her eyes moving quickly across the contents. She lingered on the credit card balance, made a soft sound that might have been recognition or confirmation. This amount of debt, targeting someone with family wealth, it fits a pattern. She looked up. But Mr. Dixon, I need you to understand something. If your instincts are right, what I find might be worse than you think. Are you prepared for that? I pulled out my checkbook, the motion steady and deliberate. Then I need to know everything. My retainer is $3,500. That covers 2 weeks of investigation, background checks, financial history, social media analysis, interviews with people in her life. If I need to go deeper, we'll discuss additional costs. I wrote the check without hesitation, my handwriting clear and controlled. When I handed it to her, my hand didn't shake. Rita tucked it into her portfolio. I'll start tomorrow. Expect my first report within a week. We shook hands. As I walked back to my truck, I felt the weight of the decision settle over me, not heavy with doubt, but solid with certainty. If Wesley wouldn't listen to warnings, I'd gather irrefutable evidence. I'd spent 36 years building a business from nothing, learning to read people, to spot lies and calculate risks. Those skills had made me successful. Now I'd use them to protect my son. Whatever it took. 2 weeks crawled by with the weight of waiting. I checked my phone constantly, scanned emails, listened for the shop office door. Rita finally called on a Thursday afternoon and asked to meet immediately. She arrived with a leather messenger bag that looked heavier than before. When she spread its contents across my desk, photographs, bank statements, credit reports, timeline charts, I understood why. Mr. Dixon, what I found is worse than typical gold digging. I leaned forward in my chair. Show me everything. Rita arranged the documents systematically, her movements precise. 4 credit cards, all maxed. $47,000 in debt. The number hit harder than I expected. How does she survive? She doesn't. She's drowning. And your son is the life raft she's swimming toward. Rita tapped one of the statements. Look at the pattern. Cash advances. Balance transfers. She's been juggling minimum payments for 18 months. I studied the spending history. Restaurants I recognized as expensive. Designer boutiques. That luxury apartment complex I'd driven past. Numbers that didn't match reality. Her rent is $2,400 monthly, Rita continued. I confirmed her income through tax records and employment verification. She makes approximately $4,000 a month. After rent, car payment, insurance, the math doesn't work. It hasn't worked for over a year. Then how? Rita slid photographs across the desk before I finished the question. There's someone else in the picture. I picked up the first image. Gertrude sat across from a man at an outdoor restaurant table, leaning close, both of them studying a document between them. The next photo showed them at a different location. Upscale bar, similar intensity. A third captured them outside a commercial building, the man gesturing emphatically while Gertrude nodded. Who is he? Marcus Trent, 41, commercial real estate broker. They've met 3 times in 2 weeks. I examined their body language carefully. No hand-holding, no intimate touches, but something about their proximity suggested familiarity, conspiracy. Is it romantic? No, it's worse. It's strategic. Look at their posture. They're planning something. My phone rang before I could respond. Wesley's name lit up the screen. I glanced at Rita, then answered, Dad, I have news. His voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard in months. I forced warmth into my tone. I'm listening. We're engaged, officially, wedding in August. The photographs of Gertrude with Marcus Trent stared up at me from the desk. I stood, walked to the window overlooking the shop floor where Miguel was installing brake pads on a Tacoma. Normal work, simple problems with mechanical solutions. That's wonderful, son. Congratulations. I thought you'd be upset. Relief flooded his words. You're my son. Your happiness matters to me. We talked for another minute, wedding venues, guest lists, how thrilled Gertrude was. I congratulated him again, told him I loved him, ended the call with promises to celebrate soon. Rita had reorganized the evidence while I spoke, giving me privacy. When I turned back, she watched me carefully. That changes the timeline, she said quietly. August, 4 months. I returned to the desk, looked at the documents with new urgency. Keep watching. I want to know who Marcus Trent is to her. Over the following week, Gertrude's pressure campaign intensified. Wesley mentioned it carefully during brief phone conversations, how other parents helped their children start marriages, how traditional it was, how meaningful financial support would be. He never demanded, just circled the topic with increasing frequency. Then came the text. Dad, can we talk? No arguments, just talk. I responded immediately. Of course. Name the time and place. Trudy wants to be there. Is that okay? I typed carefully. If that's what you want. She has ideas about the future. Our future. I think you should hear them. I stared at that message for a long moment before replying. I'm listening. The next morning, I drove to Dominic's Steakhouse, the restaurant Wesley had suggested. I parked in the lot, walked the perimeter, checked sightlines through the windows. Then I sat in my truck, pulled the small recording device from my glove box, and tested it. Arizona was a one-party consent state. I could legally record any conversation I participated in. My phone buzzed. Wesley. Tomorrow at noon. Thanks for doing this, Dad. I typed back. See you then. I opened the folder Rita had given me, studied the photographs again. Gertrude's face in one, smiling, warm, the mask she wore for Wesley. Her expression in another with Marcus, calculating, intense, stripped of pretense. Same woman, different truths. I closed the folder and started the engine. Tomorrow, I'd let her believe she was the one in control. Back home that evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing responses. Interested but cautious. Open but prudent. I rehearsed phrases until they sounded natural, until I could deliver them without the anger simmering beneath. Rita called as I was making dinner. I'm working on the Marcus connection. His financial records are clean, but there's something about their timing. Every meeting happens after he closes a major deal. Maybe he's her Mark II. Or her partner. Rita paused. Be careful tomorrow. If she's working with someone, this is more sophisticated than we thought. I promised to be careful, ended the call, and returned to my rehearsal. The performance of a lifetime started at noon tomorrow. I had 12 hours to prepare for the biggest role I'd ever play, the father considering surrender. I arrived at Dominic's 30 minutes early, requested the corner booth I'd scouted the day before. The acoustics were good. Voices carried clearly without ambient noise overwhelming conversation. Perfect for recording. I ordered water and waited, watching couples and families around me enjoying uncomplicated lunches. A father helped his young daughter cut her steak. An elderly couple held hands across the table. Simple affection untainted by deception. The recording device sat in my inner jacket pocket, already activated. My phone rested on the table, ostensibly casual, actually serving as backup documentation. Wesley and Gertrude walked in at noon. I watched them approach, his hand protective on her back, her confident stride and heels that clicked against the hardwood floor. She wore a cream blouse and carried a leather portfolio that looked expensive. I stood to greet them. Wesley's handshake was warm, hopeful. Gertrude leaned in for a cheek kiss that I accepted graciously. "Forrest, thank you so much for meeting with us." Her smile reached her eyes today. She'd practiced too. "Family's important. I'm glad we're talking." Wesley slid into the booth beside her, his relief visible. "This means a lot, Dad. Really." I met his eyes. Let him see genuine affection there. "You're my son. I want you to have a good start." Gertrude seized the opening immediately. "That's exactly what we want to discuss. A strong foundation." We ordered. Small talk about the weather, the restaurant, Wesley's recent promotion at work. Then Gertrude opened her portfolio and the performance began in earnest. She slid papers across the table, property listings printed on high-quality paper, highlighted and annotated. "We've been looking at properties in Scottsdale. Here's what makes sense for our income and future plans." I studied the listings carefully, noting prices, locations, square footage. "These are in the 450 range. Yes? We'd need about 100,000 for down payment and closing costs." She'd moved past asking to stating facts, testing my reaction. I kept my expression neutral, thoughtful. "That's substantial. What's Wesley putting in?" Wesley shifted slightly. "I have about 15,000 saved." "Which is wonderful," Gertrude interjected smoothly. "But you understand how expensive everything has become." I nodded slowly, picked up another listing, examined the photographs of granite countertops and master suites. "What's your timeline?" "We want to start our marriage in our own home." Gertrude's voice carried conviction. "I've always dreamed of financial stability, the kind I never had growing up." My hand paused mid-reach for my water glass. There it was. Not "we've dreamed," or "Wesley and I want," but I. Singular. Personal. The mask slipping for just a moment. She caught herself immediately. "I mean, we want to build something lasting. For our children someday." Wesley added earnestly, "A real foundation, Dad, like you gave me." I let the moment settle, then leaned back thoughtfully. "This is a big decision. I need to think about the numbers. Consult my financial advisor." "Of course. We're not asking for an immediate answer." Gertrude's relief was visible. She'd interpreted my stall as progress. "How soon do you need to know?" Wesley glanced at Gertrude before answering. "We're looking at August for the wedding. Ideally, we'd move into a house shortly after." "That gives us time. Let me review everything properly." I gathered the papers she'd provided, tapped them into alignment. "Maybe we can look at some specific properties together in a few weeks." The hope that lit Wesley's face made my chest tighten. He was so desperate for this to work, for his father and fiancée to find common ground. He had no idea I was documenting every word, building a case to destroy the woman sitting beside him. Gertrude produced more materials, furniture estimates, vehicle options because her current car was unreliable, even paint swatches for potential homes. The level of preparation was impressive and disturbing. She'd planned this meticulously, anticipated every question, prepared every answer. We finished lunch with promises to talk soon. Wesley hugged me in the parking lot, holding on longer than usual. "Thanks for listening, Dad, for really listening." I squeezed his shoulder. "I always listen to you." They drove away together. I stood beside my truck until their car disappeared, then climbed in and drove directly to Marcus Bailey's office. Bailey was a lean man in his 50s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. We'd met years ago through business connections. He'd handled some contract disputes for my shops. I'd called him the day before, explained I needed consultation on a family matter. In his office, I played portions of the recording. He listened without interruption, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he set down his pen. She's fishing for a commitment without legal obligation. Can I protect Wesley legally? If you give them money, you can structure it as a loan to Wesley specifically, with documentation. Protects you if the marriage fails. I shook my head. I'm not giving them money. I'm gathering evidence. Bailey studied me for a moment, then continued documenting. Everything. Conversations, texts, financial records. If this goes where I think it's going, you'll need an airtight case. For what exactly? For when your son realizes what she is. You'll need proof that you were right, that you were protecting him, not sabotaging his happiness. Documentation becomes your defense against accusations of interference. I hadn't thought that far ahead, but he was right. Wesley might never forgive me for exposing Gertrude, but he'd definitely never forgive me if I knew and said nothing. Bailey walked me through legal frameworks, financial elder abuse laws, fraud statutes, even recording consent regulations. By the time I left his office, I had a clearer picture of the legal landscape I was navigating. In my truck in the parking garage, I sat with the engine running, processing everything. My phone rang. Rita Chen. I found something about Marcus Trent. You need to see this. I checked the time. Late afternoon, golden phoenix sun slanting through the concrete structure. I'm coming to you now. I started to pull out, then stopped. The folder Gertrude had left me sat on the passenger seat, all her carefully prepared materials. I picked up one of the property listings, studied the smiling stock photo of a happy couple in front of a house. I dropped it back on the seat and drove toward Rita's office, replaying Gertrude's voice in my mind. I've always dreamed of financial stability, the kind I never had. Just I, not we. That singular pronoun echoed as I drove, each repetition tightening my grip on the steering wheel. Whatever Rita had discovered about Marcus Trent, I was ready for it. Each piece of evidence was another step toward protecting Wesley, whether he wanted protection or not. Rita's latest report sat open on my desk. Photographs of Gertrude and Marcus Trent from years ago, social media messages discussing finding the right opportunity, financial records showing they'd worked together before Wesley ever entered the picture. The connection was undeniable now, not just manipulation, a practiced operation. My phone rang. Wesley's name lit the screen. 3 weeks, Dad. 3 weeks, and you haven't given us an answer. I set down my coffee carefully. His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard since our last fight. These decisions take time. I'm being responsible. Responsible or controlling. Trudy thinks you're sabotaging us. The shift in his tone told me everything. 3 weeks of daily exposure to her poison had done its work. Wesley, I need you to listen. No, I'm done listening to your suspicions and your excuses. I pulled up the video call function, pressed connect. His face appeared on screen, jaw tight, eyes hard. Behind him I could see his apartment, the space I'd helped him move into 5 years ago. I have proof, evidence that she's not who she claims. His expression twisted. You hired someone to spy on her? Do you hear yourself? I hired someone to protect you. From what? From being happy? From having a life you don't control? He was shouting now, years of buried resentment surfacing with Gertrude's careful cultivation. I grabbed the investigation folder from my desk, spread the contents in front of the camera. From being used, please, just look at these documents. Wesley's image on screen turned away, his face in profile, refusing to see. I'm not looking at anything. This is paranoid. This is obsessive. She has $47,000 in debt. She's meeting with a man named Marcus Trent, who... The screen went black. He'd ended the call. I sat staring at my phone, documents scattered across my desk, evidence that meant nothing if Wesley wouldn't see it. 4 days passed in tense silence. Then my phone rang again. Wesley's voice was different this time, softer but somehow more dangerous. Dad, we need to talk. I'm here. Trudy's pregnant. We're having a baby. The words landed with calculated precision. I kept my voice measured, careful. That's significant news. It changes things. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about our child. I closed my eyes, ran through the possibilities. The timing was suspicious, too convenient, announced right after our failed confrontation. But I had no proof, and accusing her of faking a pregnancy would make me look even more unhinged. I understand. Do you? Because our baby needs a grandfather who supports this family. The implicit threat was clear. Accept Gertrude or lose access to your grandchild. I made my decision then. Not surrender, but strategic retreat. Sometimes you have to lose the battle to win the war. 2 days later, I called Wesley from my camelback shop. The familiar sounds of air compressors and impact wrenches surrounded me, grounding me in reality as I prepared to deliver the performance. "I've been thinking about what you said. And?" His voice was guarded. "You're right. I've been too cautious, too controlling." Silence then. "Really?" "A grandchild changes everything. After the wedding, we'll sit down and work out how I can help." "Dad, thank you. This means everything." The relief in his voice made my chest tighten. I ended the call and stood motionless in my office, letting the shop noise wash over me. Miguel knocked on the doorframe. "Boss, you okay?" "Fine, just handling family business." He nodded and left. I pulled out my phone and called Rita. "I need you to verify something. The pregnancy. Can you check if it's real?" "Medical records are protected, but I have contacts in the healthcare network. I can look for prenatal appointments, obstetric care. If she's actually pregnant, there should be a trail." "Do it," discreetly. While Rita worked her channels, I received the call I'd been dreading. I found her pattern. 2 previous engagements. I sat forward in my chair. "Tell me everything." Tucson, 2019. Dentist, 42 years old. Engaged for 4 months, then nothing. Flagstaff, 2022. Contractor, owned 3 properties. Engaged for 6 months. Broke it off suddenly. "Did you talk to them?" "Tried. Both declined to discuss it. Whatever happened, they don't want to revisit it." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "That tells us enough. She's done this before. Wesley isn't her first target. He's just her current one." "There's more." I pulled social media archives. She was posting photos with the Flagstaff contractor. Fancy restaurants, vacation spots, living well beyond what her income supported. Then suddenly, all posts disappeared. Complete scrub. Because the engagement ended and she moved on to the next opportunity. "Exactly. And now she's doing the same with Wesley." That evening, I created a new folder at my desk. Labeled it simply, Evidence, Complete Pattern. Inside went Rita's findings about the previous engagements, the Marcus Trent connection, financial records, surveillance photos, everything organized chronologically, building an undeniable narrative. My phone buzzed. "Wesley, Trudy and I picked August 15th for the wedding. Hope you'll be there, Dad." I stared at that date. August 15th. Less than 3 months away. I typed back, "I'll be there." 2 days later, I met Rita at a coffee shop on 16th Street. She slid a thick folder across the table. Professional binding, tabbed sections, comprehensive documentation. "This is complete," she said. "Financial records, surveillance photos, Marcus Trent's involvement, the previous engagements, communication records, everything." I opened the folder, flipped through pages of meticulous work, bank statements showing debt accumulation, photographs of Gertrude with Marcus, their body language unmistakably conspiratorial, social media archives showing her with previous fiancé, the same pattern repeating, credit card bills, spending records, the mathematical impossibility of her claimed lifestyle. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Wesley. "We're finalizing details. This is really happening." I looked up at Rita. "I'll be there," I said quietly, "and so will all of this." I closed the folder, placed my hand flat on top of it. The weight of evidence, the burden of truth. As I stood to leave, Rita stopped me. "Once you do this, there's no going back. Wesley might not forgive you, at least not right away." I met her eyes. "If I don't do this, I'll lose him permanently, just to someone else." I picked up the folder and walked out into the Phoenix afternoon heat. The evidence felt heavy in my hands, but my stride was purposeful and steady. I had 3 months to prepare for the most important confrontation of my life. Marcus Bailey's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. I took the elevator up with the evidence folder in a leather briefcase, feeling the weight of what came next. Bailey greeted me at his office door, noted my expression, offered coffee. I declined. We sat across from each other, his large desk between us like a courtroom barrier. I placed the briefcase on the desk, opened it, removed the folder. "I need you to verify every piece of this is legally obtained and admissible." Bailey pulled the folder toward himself and began to read. An hour passed. He worked methodically, reading glasses perched on his nose, making notes in margins. Occasionally he looked up to ask a question. Where did the private investigator get the financial records? Legitimate databases licensed investigators can access. Public records. And the surveillance photographs? Public spaces, restaurants, outdoor locations. No trespassing, no privacy violations. Bailey nodded, continued reading. The recordings? I was present in all conversations recorded. Arizona is one-party consent. He set down his pen finally. Then legally you're clear. All of this is admissible if needed. I plan to present this at the wedding, during toasts. Bailey removed his glasses, studied me carefully. That's nuclear. You understand the consequences. Wesley won't listen any other way. He needs to see it publicly with witnesses so she can't spin it later. He'll be humiliated. He'll be humiliated for a day. If I don't do this, he'll be exploited for years. Bailey leaned back in his chair. I'll document our consultation. When this unfolds, you may need proof you acted on legal advice. Over the following weeks, I worked on my presentation. Late nights in my home office. Computer screen glowing blue in the darkness. I scanned documents, created slides, wrote accompanying narrative. Each piece of evidence got its own section. Financial deception. Marcus Trent connection. Previous pattern. The fake pregnancy. Rita called in mid-July with confirmation about the last point. The pregnancy is definitely fake. No appointments, no prenatal care, nothing. Can you document that? I have a report from my source at the medical network. No records under her name or social. Perfect. That's the last piece. Mr. Dixon, are you ready for this? I saved another backup of my presentation to a USB drive. I don't have a choice. If I'm not ready, I do it anyway. Through Bailey's office, I requested a complete credit report on Gertrude. When it arrived 3 weeks later, I picked it up from his office and sat in my truck in the parking garage, reading through it page by page. The full scope was worse than I'd known. Not just 4 credit cards, but personal loans, medical debt and collections, a defaulted car loan. Total debt, $54,000. Recent inquiries showed she'd been applying for new credit, presumably to fund wedding expenses. I photographed every page with my phone. Another backup layer. Late July, Wesley called with news that shouldn't have surprised me. Dad, I need to talk about the wedding. Problems? Costs went higher than expected. The venue, the catering, we're about $12,000 over budget. I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the desert landscape. I'll cover it. Really? Just like that? You're my son. This is your wedding. Send me the details, and I'll write a check. Thank you, Dad. This means we're okay, right? We'll always be okay, no matter what. I wrote the check that evening, pausing with pen hovering over the amount line. $12,000. Not the money that hurt, what it represented. I wrote clearly, tore the check from the book, slid it into an envelope for Wesley. Investment in justice. Throughout June and July, Wesley made attempts to rebuild our relationship. Dinner invitations, casual visits to the shop. I accepted some, declined others. Maintained careful emotional distance, warm enough not to raise suspicion, detached enough to protect myself from the coming storm. One dinner in mid-July, we sat at a casual Mexican place we'd gone to since he was a teenager. He talked about wedding plans, about the baby coming, about their future. Trudy's excited you're coming to the wedding. It means a lot to her. I wouldn't miss it. I know things were tense for a while. I'm glad we got past it. I nodded, sipped my water. We're family, Wesley. That doesn't change. Wait until you meet your grandkid. Everything will make sense then. I looked at my son, 34 years old, intelligent, successful, and completely blind to what was happening. I'm sure it will. The night before the wedding, I sat in my home office. Everything prepared. Presentation loaded on laptop. USB backup in jacket pocket. Printed documents in briefcase. 3 copies of everything. Multiple backup systems. My phone showed a message from Wesley. Tomorrow's the big day. Glad you'll be there, Dad. I typed back. Wouldn't miss it for anything. I stood, walked to my bedroom, laid out my suit. Dark gray, conservative, authoritative. The outfit of a man about to deliver justice. Before getting into bed, I opened my nightstand drawer and looked at a photograph. Wesley, as a young boy, sitting in my first auto shop, holding a wrench almost as big as he was, grinning at the camera. 7 years old, gap-toothed, completely trusting that his father would always protect him. I touched the glass over his face. "I'm sorry it has to be this way," I whispered to the image, "but I'm your father. Protecting you is what I do." I closed the drawer, the photo returning to darkness. My alarm was set for 6 a.m. The wedding started at 3 p.m. I had 9 hours to prepare for the moment that would either save my son or destroy our relationship forever. I lay in bed, eyes open in the darkness, rehearsing tomorrow's moment, taking the microphone during toasts, facing the crowd, Wesley's face when he realized, Gertrude's expression when her operation collapsed publicly. My heart beat steadily, each pulse counting down to revelation. Tomorrow, everything would change. I stood in the hotel parking lot, looking up at the venue entrance. Morning sun blazed bright in the Arizona sky. Music drifted from the ceremony area. Guests arriving, excitement building in the air. I touched my jacket pocket. USB drive present. My briefcase felt heavier than physics allowed. My phone buzzed. "Bailey, I'm here, back right section, ready when you are." I took a breath, straightened my tie, and walked toward the entrance. The ceremony was beautiful. I had to admit that. Outdoor setting, flower arrangements in cream and gold, string quartet playing something classical. Wesley stood at the altar in his tuxedo, face glowing with happiness I hadn't seen in years. Gertrude walked down the aisle, picture-perfect bride in a dress that probably cost $8,000 she didn't have. Guests turned to watch, phones out capturing the moment. I sat in the third row, face neutral, hands resting on my knees. My fingers pressed together tightly enough that my knuckles whitened. Slightly, the officiant conducted the ceremony. Vows exchanged, rings presented, then a detail I'd been counting on. "We'll complete the legal paperwork Monday at the courthouse," the officiant mentioned. The marriage wasn't legally binding yet. Just a ceremony. Not a contract? Not yet. After, guests moved to the covered patio for cocktails. I positioned myself near the bar, briefcase at my feet. The AV technician I'd spoken with weeks ago gave me a subtle nod. The connection was ready. My presentation loaded on the reception hall's large screen. I waited, nursing sparkling water, watching Gertrude work the crowd. She was good, accepting congratulations, posing for photos, playing the radiant bride perfectly. Then she approached me, still smiling, gracious for the cameras. She leaned close, whispered so only I could hear. "Old man, you'll buy us a house within a month of today." I stood motionless, listening. "Otherwise, I walk away, and you'll only see your son through a courtroom when I sue for child support." She straightened, her voice rising to pleasant public volume. "Thanks for being here today. It means everything." I took a slow sip of my water, set it down carefully. "You're welcome." She walked away satisfied, back to her admirers. I remained at the bar until she disappeared into the crowd, then allowed my jaw to tighten for just a moment. She'd just confirmed everything. Guests moved into the reception hall. Dinner was served. I barely tasted mine. Toast time approached with the inevitability of sunrise. The best man went first. Funny stories about Wesley, traditional wishes for happiness. Laughter rippled through the room. The maid of honor followed, voice thick with emotion, talking about how perfect they were together. Then the officiant took the microphone. And now, the father of the groom, Forrest Dixon. I stood, buttoned my suit jacket, deliberate preparation, took the microphone. The room applauded politely. Wesley looked at me with pride, expectation. I began with tradition. Wesley has been the greatest joy of my life. Watching him grow from a boy who could barely hold a wrench to the man standing here today, there's no greater privilege than being his father. The room responded warmly. Guests smiled. I saw Wesley's eyes getting wet, which is why what I'm about to do is the hardest thing I've ever done. The warmth shifted. Confused murmurs. I paused, took a breath, gave weight to what came next. Then I pressed the remote in my pocket. The screen behind me lit up. But as a father, I cannot allow this marriage to begin with a lie. Silence crashed over the room like a physical force. Gertrude Whitmore is not who she claims to be. She's not marrying my son for love. She's executing a plan. Gertrude stood, face transforming from shock to fury. What are you talking about? This is crazy. I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. Credit card statements, balances highlighted in red. $54,000 in debt across 6 accounts. Monthly rent she cannot afford on her actual income. I clicked again. Photographs of Gertrude with Marcus Trent filled the screen. Restaurant meetings, intense conversations, their body language unmistakably conspiratorial. Regular meetings with Marcus Trent, a man she's known for years, planning sessions for what she calls advantageous relationships. Another click. Audio waveform appeared. I pressed play. Gertrude's voice filled the room. Old man, you'll buy us a house within a month of today. Otherwise, I walk away, and you'll only see your son through a courtroom when I sue for child support. The recording was from 20 minutes ago. I'd had my phone in my pocket during cocktail hour. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some guests stood. Others sat frozen. Next slide. Medical documentation. And the pregnancy she announced to secure my cooperation? It doesn't exist. No medical appointments, no prenatal care, no pregnancy. Gertrude's voice rose, shrill now. You had no right. This is invasion of privacy. I continued calmly, methodically. Everything here was obtained legally. Private investigator, licensed and bonded. Arizona is a one-party consent state for recordings. Final slides. Records of 2 previous broken engagements to wealthy men. Social media archives showing the same pattern, repeating. Wesley finally found his voice, standing slowly. Dad, what? What is this? I looked directly at my son. This is me protecting you. This is me being your father. Gertrude turned to Wesley, desperation replacing calculation. Don't listen to him. He's trying to destroy us. But Wesley was staring at the screen, evidence still displayed in sharp clarity. His face had gone pale. The reception hall descended into chaos. Some guests were leaving, others clustering in groups, whispering, a few filming on phones. I set down the microphone carefully, reached for my briefcase. Gertrude's voice cut through the noise. I'm calling the police. This is harassment. This is illegal stalking. She had her phone out, dialing frantically. I looked across the room at Bailey. He gave a slight nod. I remained standing at the head table, waiting. Through the windows in the distance, red and blue lights flashed against the afternoon sky. The consequences were arriving. In that moment before the police entered, Wesley looked up at me. Our eyes met across the chaos. His face showed betrayal, confusion, hurt, but underneath, something else beginning. Dawning comprehension. He looked from me to Gertrude, who was shouting into her phone, makeup smeared by angry tears, then back to me, standing quiet and steady amid the storm. Wesley opened his mouth as if to speak. Then the first police officer walked through the door. The patrol car pulled into the venue's circular drive, lights flashing but silent. 2 officers emerged, a younger man and a more experienced woman. Inside, they could hear raised voices before entering. Bailey reached me just as they walked through the entrance. I straightened slightly, waited. The officers took in the scene. Disrupted wedding reception, agitated bride, stunned remaining guests, one man standing calmly with a briefcase. The female officer approached Gertrude first. Gertrude immediately began pointing at me, words tumbling out. Illegal surveillance, stalking, harassment, invasion of privacy. The younger officer approached me. Sir, what's your name? Forrest Dixon. This is my attorney, Marcus Bailey. Can you tell me what happened here? I presented evidence of fraud at my son's wedding. The bride has been deceiving my family to obtain money. Bailey stepped forward slightly. Everything was obtained legally. We have full documentation. The officer glanced at his partner, who was still listening to Gertrude's rapid-fire accusations. We're going to need to see that documentation. 20 minutes later, a detective arrived. Badge identified her as Sarah Morrison. Experienced, sharp-eyed, carrying a tablet, and an air of professional competence. I'm Detective Sarah Morrison. Who called this in? Gertrude's voice carried across the room. I did. He's been stalking me, spying on me. This is harassment. Morrison's gaze swept the scene calmly. Ma'am, I'll take your statement. Sir, she looked at me. You're the father of the groom? Yes, and I have evidence of attempted fraud. Let's start from the beginning. Everyone involved, conference room. Now. Her gesture redirected people like traffic. We followed, me, Bailey, Morrison, and the male patrol officer, to one conference room, Gertrude and the female officer to another. In the private space, Morrison pointed to chairs. We sat. I placed my briefcase on the table, opened it, removed organized folders. This private investigator, Rita Chen, you hired her? Yes. In February. $350 an hour, standard rate. And she's licensed in Arizona? Bailey provided the license number. Fully licensed and bonded. All surveillance was conducted in public spaces. No trespassing, no illegal wiretaps. Morrison checked her tablet, made calls to verify Rita's credentials. She reviewed documents methodically, credit reports, surveillance photos, time-stamped location data. And these recordings? I was present in all conversations. Arizona is one-party consent. That's correct? Morrison flipped through more pages, occasionally stopping to read carefully. She made notes on her tablet, photographed certain documents. After 40 minutes of review, she closed the folder she'd been reading and stood deliberately. Excuse me. She walked from our conference room to where Gertrude was being interviewed, carrying specific documents. Through the slightly open door, I could hear the shift in questioning. Ms. Whitmore, did you tell Wesley Dixon and his father that you were pregnant? That's private medical information. The medical records here show no pregnancy, no appointments, no prenatal care. He had no right to access my medical records. These aren't your records. They're confirmation that no records exist under your name at any major Phoenix hospital or clinic. A pause. I might have been mistaken about the pregnancy. Did you request money from Forrest Dixon based on this pregnancy? The conversation continued, but Morrison closed the door. Bailey leaned toward me. She's good. She caught the fraud angle immediately. We waited another hour. The conference room felt stuffy despite air conditioning. I could hear hotel staff in the reception hall, dismantling decorations, the sounds of a celebration being erased. Finally, Morrison returned to our room. She sat across from us, tablet between her hands. Mr. Dixon, you're free to go. I'll be opening an investigation into Ms. Whitmore's actions, specifically the false pregnancy claim used to solicit money. That could constitute fraud. I'll need formal statements from you and your son in the coming days. I nodded, began packing materials back into my briefcase. Bailey shook Morrison's hand professionally. Thank you, Detective. We exited the conference room. The reception hall was nearly empty now, just hotel staff cleaning up, flower arrangements still on tables like abandoned monuments. Wesley sat alone at the head table, still in his tuxedo. Gertrude was near the entrance, speaking to the female patrol officer, her voice lower now, defeated. I walked toward my son. Wesley looked up, saw me coming. The space between us felt vast, despite being only feet. I stopped a respectful distance away, waiting to see if he wanted me closer or needed space. His face was impossible to read. Behind us, staff dismantled the head table. The screen that had displayed evidence was dark. The celebration that was meant to happen here was long gone. I held my briefcase in one hand, months of work contained in leather and paper. Wesley finally spoke, voice raw. I need time to think, to understand all of this. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. He stood slowly, removed his boutonniere, set it on the table. Small gesture of rejection. He began walking toward the exit. Then he paused. Without turning around, he said quietly, Thank you. For, I don't know, for something. Then he was gone, leaving me standing in the ruins of a wedding that never was. Across the room, Gertrude's voice rose again briefly. This isn't over. I'll sue. The officer with her said something I couldn't hear. Gertrude's voice cut off. I stood there a moment longer, briefcase in hand, surrounded by the aftermath. Then I walked out into the Phoenix evening, where the temperature was finally dropping below 100 degrees, and drove home through streets I'd known for 36 years, to a house that felt different now, lighter somehow, despite everything. 2 days after the wedding disaster, my phone rang. Bailey's voice carried professional satisfaction. Gertrude tried to find an attorney to sue you for defamation and emotional distress. She contacted 7 firms. Every single one declined after reviewing your evidence. I stood at my kitchen window, morning coffee cooling on the counter. What did they tell her? Most were diplomatic. One was apparently direct, Told her she should be worried about criminal charges, not filing civil suits. And Marcus Trent? Public statement claiming minimal contact. He's distancing himself fast. I walked to my home office, looked out at my property, the physical manifestation of what I'd built through decades of honest work. The contrast between earned success and attempted theft felt stark. "Rats leaving a sinking ship," I said. Over the following days, Gertrude's financial house of cards collapsed entirely. Bailey kept me updated. Credit card companies filing collection suits, landlord beginning eviction proceedings. By August 20th, her apartment was going, her credit destroyed, her social circle evaporated. The wedding footage had gone viral. Guests had filmed and shared everything. Her reputation was ash. August 27th, I was under a car at the shop when my phone rang. I rolled out, wiped grease from my hands, answered, "Mr. Dixon, I wanted to update you. We found a previous victim." Detective Morrison's voice was steady, professional. Previous victim? The dentist from Tucson, 2019. Same pattern. Fake pregnancy, financial demands. He paid her $15,000 to go away quietly. I stood in the garage bay, tool in hand. He'll testify? He's providing a formal statement. Fraud charges are looking very likely now. That evening I sat in my living room reviewing everything that had happened. 6 months from first meeting Gertrude to this moment. 6 months of investigation, strategy, patience. My doorbell rang unexpectedly. Wesley stood on my doorstep holding a 6-pack of beer and wearing old work clothes. His face looked drawn, exhausted. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. "Always." He set the beer on the kitchen counter, an offering, a peace gesture. "I don't want to talk about it yet. Can I help at the shop, like I used to? I've got a transmission that needs work. Could use another pair of hands." His nod was small, grateful. "Thanks, Dad." The next 2 days we worked together. Changed oil, rotated tires, diagnosed engine problems. The familiar environment, the mechanical problems with clear solutions, the routine, it helped him process. We didn't force conversation, just worked. Handed tools, discussed technical issues, fell into old rhythms. During a break on the second day, sitting on upturned buckets in the shop bay, Wesley spoke. "Hand me the 3/4 socket." I passed the tool. Several minutes of silence, just work sounds, impact wrench, air compressor, radio playing softly. I saw all the signs, I just didn't want to believe them. I didn't stop working. Sometimes we see what we want to see. "You saw the truth? I had distance, you had feelings. Those are different lenses." More silence. Wesley tightened something under the hood, emerged with grease on his forearms. "I'm embarrassed. Everyone saw me being played. Everyone saw you being a good man who trusted someone. That's not shameful." "It feels shameful." I set down my wrench, looked at him directly. "In 1995, I partnered with a guy who stole $40,000 from the business. I trusted him completely. Felt like an idiot for months." Wesley looked up, surprised. "You never told me that." "Because I learned something. Trust isn't stupidity. Betraying trust is the crime, not offering it." He absorbed that, nodded slowly, returned to work. By the end of the second day, something had shifted. Not fixed. Healing isn't that fast, but beginning to mend. As we locked up the shop that evening, the sun setting and casting long shadows across the parking lot, Wesley turned to me. "Dad, can we talk? Really talk?" "My place. I'll make dinner." We drove separately to my house. Inside, while I prepared food, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, Wesley sat at the kitchen table. The same table where this all started months ago when he first brought Gertrude to meet me. The circular nature wasn't lost on either of us. I set 2 plates down, sat across from my son. He looked up, opened his mouth to speak. My phone buzzed. Text from Morrison. "Formal charges being filed tomorrow. Thought you'd want to know." I showed Wesley the message. He read it, nodded slowly. "Good," he said quietly. Then he looked at me. "But that's not what I want to talk about. I need to say." He stopped, collected himself. The conversation we'd both been avoiding and needing was finally beginning. Wesley pushed my phone back across the table. "Good," he repeated. "She should face consequences." He took a breath. "But Dad, I need to say some things. About you. About me. About what happened." I set my fork down, gave him full attention. Neither of us was really hungry, but the ritual of sharing a meal created safety for difficult conversation. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was being stubborn. You're my son. Giving up was never an option. I ignored so many signs. I wanted to believe her so badly that I didn't let myself see the truth. That's human. It's not a failure. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him. Visible tension. How did you stay so calm when I was calling you paranoid, dismissing everything you said? I wasn't always calm, but I knew if I reacted emotionally, you'd dig in deeper. So I focused on getting evidence you couldn't dismiss. We talked for 2 hours. Wesley expressed everything he'd been processing: gratitude, humiliation, recognition. As the conversation progressed, his posture gradually relaxed. By the end, he was leaning back in his chair, shoulders no longer hunched. The next morning, Bailey called. Formal charges filed this morning. Attempted fraud, Class 4 felony. Filing false reports, Class 6. I was at my shop office, taking notes methodically. What's the timeline? Arraignment in 2 weeks. Trial probably won't be scheduled until next year. Will they need Wesley to testify? Eventually, yes. He's listed as a victim, but not for months. Good. He needs time to heal first. I closed my notebook with finality. This chapter was moving toward conclusion. Over the following days, Wesley systematically removed Gertrude from his life, changed locks on his apartment, blocked her number, returned items she'd left at his place. Each action was quiet but purposeful, mimicking my methodical approach. He sold the engagement ring to a jeweler, took less than he paid, didn't care about the money, just needed it gone. August 29th, Bailey presented me with a cost analysis. Total investigation expenses, $15,400. Rita Chen's fees, attorney consultations, document preparation. You have every right to file for restitution. $15,400 in documented expenses. I ran my finger down the itemized list, each expense representing a step in protecting my son. She doesn't have it. She'll never have it. Doesn't mean you can't file judgment, garnish wages if she ever works again. What would that accomplish? She's already facing criminal charges. Her life is destroyed. It would make you whole financially. I pushed the paper across the desk to Bailey, the gesture physically representing release. I am whole. My son is safe. That's what mattered. August 30th, evening. Wesley came to my house. We sat on the back terrace as the sun set. Peaceful evening. Temperature finally cooling after another scorching Arizona day. We held bottles of beer, comfortable in outdoor chairs, not looking at each other constantly, sometimes gazing out at the yard, at the darkening sky, comfortable silence between sentences. I owe you an apology for not trusting you, for everything I said. You don't owe me anything. You were in love. Love makes people vulnerable. Still, you were right, and I should have listened. Being a father means protecting your children, even when they don't want protection. Wesley laughed quietly. Next time, I'll listen to your concerns earlier. Next time, bring me someone who loves you for you, not for what I have. Deal. Though it might be a while before I trust anyone again. Take your time. The right person will be worth the wait. We sat in silence for several minutes. The sky transitioned from orange to purple to deep blue. Stars began appearing. Soft outdoor lights illuminated the terrace. Insects chirped in the distance. Wesley finished his beer, stood prepared to leave. I walked him to the door. At the threshold, he paused, turned, offered his hand. I took it. Firm handshake. Then he pulled me into a brief, tight hug. When we separated, both of us nodded, understanding passing between us without words. Wesley walked to his car, waved once before getting in. I watched him drive away, taillights disappearing down the street. I returned to the terrace, sat back down in my chair, looked up at the now dark sky full of stars, allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The work was done. My son was safe. Justice was served. I picked up both empty beer bottles, carried them inside, turned off the outdoor lights, closed the door on this chapter of our lives. Outside, the empty terrace chairs sat in darkness, stars visible above. The peacefulness of resolution. No more battles to fight, no more evidence to gather, no more threats to counter. Just a quiet August evening in Phoenix, and a family that survived betrayal by standing together when it mattered most. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.